Welcome to Coach to Scale, how modern leaders build coaching cultures. I'm your host, Matt Bonelli. Join me as we build a community of like-minded professionals who share the belief that effective coaching improves the performance of every team member. Our mission is to help leaders become better coaches. The Coach to Scale podcast is sponsored by Coachum, the world's first AI coaching execution platform that leverages evidence-based coaching to increase quota attainment. And with that, let's get started. I am excited to sit down with today's guest, and I'd like to start off with a quote. And that quote is this: "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And today's guest is going to talk about a lot of the things that, when building a culture of coaching, start off as acts, but then become habits. She's developed an expertise in the cybersecurity arena. She's worked with companies such as ForcePoint and SailPoint. Coming to us today out of the thriving city of Austin, Texas, she's the head of America's sales development, commercial, and international sales at VMware Carbon Black. Victoria Abeling, welcome to Coach to Scale.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. It's exciting.
Well, we're happy to have you and really excited to sit down. And as I went through your background, I know we've talked about this, you've developed this area of focus with cybersecurity. And I'd like to make sure that we get to that later, but you're coming at it from a truly interesting angle at a very, very relevant time. Let's talk about coaching for a second. Now, you've been doing this for a while, and I know you share the passion for coaching and developing people. There's a lot of myths in the business. Some are warranted, some aren't. But Victoria, can you talk about a common myth about coaching salespeople or sales leaders that you think is misguided or perhaps misunderstood?
Yes, of course. So, I think a common myth that a lot of sales leaders, as well as their teams, struggle with is that they view coaching as punitive or a big brother. And I view this as my job is to make you better at your craft. And in order to do that, I have to spend time in order to help you get better at what you're doing. And by that, I coach you. We do deal reviews. We look at the forecast. We listen to recordings. We do pitch contests. And so it may feel like, as a individual with your manager inspecting this, that you are not doing your job. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
On that, so I think you touched on something super important and pervasive, which is that that coaching, when that manager is trying to help someone get better, it's often perceived as punitive. Why does that myth persist?
I think because there's a myth that if your manager pays attention to you, now you're on a plan or you're going to be managed out. It is perceived as, I should be able to do my job because I was hired to do this. And if someone's inspecting me, then it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. I think salespeople have a innate sense of, I can do this myself. I want to be the best. And if someone else is telling them how to do something better, they tend to feel like they are not up to standard or performing. And I think one of the reasons I love what I do is that I can help shift some of that perception. And my goal is to make you better than me, right? My goal is that if I leave, you're my backfill, you are getting promoted. And how could you do that without the support from a leader who may have already been there? I mean, not that I have all the answers, but there's always a different point of view.
Well, you're coming from a place of wanting to help, not wanting to make someone look bad, not wanting to, hey, step aside, let me show the world what I can do and why I'm the boss. Is that the issue? Is it that people think that it's punitive because their manager's helping them? Was that culture? Did we create that? Did sales leaders create that over time by only focusing on the people that were struggling and letting the people who had more experience kind of, sink or swim on their own. How
Well,
much of that do we have to bear?
yeah, so I think if you go back to, not that I'm a historian on sales, but I've been doing this for a while,
You
probably
lived it.
dinosaur. Yeah, I've lived it, for at least 25 years now. But outside sales was really historically how people got into sales. It was door to door. It was really tough job. You were trained and then you were let go, and that sort of was the culture. Like you had to almost sink or swim. As companies became, as technology happened in the 90s and even early 2000s, that's really when inside sales was founded. And when you think about that, it's inherently about guidance and and coaching and development, because you're taking folks right out of school with no experience and putting them into the real world. So there's almost an inherent way that coaching has grown up with inside sales and sales development that permeates through what we do today. So, I view it as it is table stakes. There's no other way to do your job without knowing how to do things, and constant, cadence of coaching and training. So, um, yeah, I think we actually it was created that way because that was how it was done. And then we've evolved to understanding that this is a part of how you should do things in the future. Do we do it well? Not all the time. Are we trying to get better at it? Yeah, that's why we're here talking today, and I want to see what else we could share with the rest of the community.
So I started off with that quote about what largely could attribute it to Aristotle, but I think it's a guy named Will Durant that came up with it. And it talked about we are what we repeatedly do. And when we do things consistently, those acts become habits. Building a coaching culture doesn't happen overnight. The culture is something that takes a long time to build. What are some of those elements or key points to consider when building a coaching culture?
Coaching culture is obviously very important in any sales organization. It's also, I think, one of the first that can be put aside very quickly when you have competing deadlines, responsibility that occupies your time. In fact, one of the easiest ways to miss out on some coaching opportunities to move a one-on-one because something gets scheduled over it.
Yeah.
It's something I hate and I wish I was better at, because it's easier to move one meeting that, with one person than it is a larger meeting. So the one thing that I think that is extremely important is consistency. And when I say that, you have to have an operating cadence, like standard operating procedures. It might be something that you create with your team. It could be something that your boss puts out. It could be a company operating procedure. And I do think one thing we do very well here at VMware Carbon Black is we have a very strong support system on an operating culture as well as a cadence. So what I do to support that is make sure that we may miss a week, but it is important for me to make sure that I'm doing individual development plans with my leaders, just as much as they should be cascading it down to their team. And I think it's important to publish that calendar. They need to know when it's coming. They need to know why we're doing it and what to expect. And coaching isn't.
Can you just elaborate on when you say operating culture for the folks who are thinking that might mean this, that might mean that? What is the operating culture, and how does that fit into coaching at VMware Carbon Black?
Yeah, so I look at it in calendar years. You've got, what do we do on an annual basis? Maybe that's promotions, maybe that's equity planning. Then you look at it at a half. What do we do on a half? We want to do development plans with each team. We were going to do performance reviews. Then we look at it on a quarter and then a week basis. What do we do at the quarter? And usually at the quarter level, this is where the performance and the coaching of, you have every 90 days to, I think every sales rep knows you have 90 days to perform and you're only as good as last quarter. So you've got 90 days to show up. And in those 90 days, I'm going to help you with hitting your number. How much are you adding opportunity? Are we poised to make sure that every deal we're talking to is ready to close? Or, what are we missing? And then that's where you bring in some sales methodology and with your team. But that also flags where coaching is important. Maybe someone needs help on negotiation. Maybe someone needs help on discovery. I'm really big on discovery. I think if you can teach your folks how to discover early and often in the pipeline, there's so many people that can help you move it to close. You've got your your finance and your deal desk. You have your leaders. You've got your specialists. But if you can't understand if this is a good deal right off the bat, we're kind of dead in the water. So I really believe in that. That early coaching of discovery and sort of curious questions. That's a really big deal for me.
So with discovery, it after a solid discovery call, most of the time, I would think you can tell whether there's a sincere willingness and ability to buy, or there's a fire, there's a spark.
Yep.
But a lot of times you come away from that call and if there was another set of eyes and ears and they were being objective, they would say,
don't put that in pipeline.
No way. But what is your experience there? Do sometimes we cling to opportunities that aren't really opportunities, despite the evidence, to support that there's probably nothing there?
Absolutely. I mean, like if you think about average sales, close rates, you're probably somewhere between 15 to 30, depending on maybe sales cycle and ASP. My business runs a little bit faster than some of my counterparts in enterprise, just as we're more transactional. But there are definite buying signals. I'm a buyer myself, as with other vendors. I know when I want something. I know when I have budget. I know if I need to pull in my executive sponsor. I'm a champion or I'm not. And so I definitely think that, there are times on a forecast call where I will say that's not going to happen, you guys. Like I just know it. You haven't heard from them in a month. That's not. Those are not indications of a good deal. Now they could always come back, right? And so I know that has happened. I'm generalizing a little bit, but I do think that there are ways that as a leader we can help people understand through coaching if this is going to go anywhere. And there's a reason. Buyers are more sophisticated now. They've already done their research. They know what they want ahead of time. And we've got a path of our journey of how to demo. They probably just want to see it, but we haven't done discovery yet. So there's a friction already between the buying and the selling.
Victoria, is it important to have as part of that coaching culture the notion that not everybody is qualified to be one of your customers? Like in your case, not everybody's qualified to be a VMware Carbon Black customer. And the faster that we can get disqualify opportunities, the more we'll be able to focus on the more qualified opportunities. And so how important is that? And how important is that at both the individual contributor level, but also like the working with the frontline managers to let them know that it's in their best interest to disqualify as much as they're trying to qualify?
Absolutely. I mean, LinkedIn right now is a plethora of lots of sales stats. But one thing that that I see is, pipeline is really difficult right now for everyone, no matter what industry you're in. And as a sales rep, you are, there's a juxtaposition between I've got to perform, but I also have to hit KPIs and metrics. And so, this goes back a little bit to, close rates and, is that a real good deal? There's also just self-perseverance at times. And you've got to balance that as a leader as well. And, it's probably naive to think that everything in your pipeline is done with good intentions, but it's good intention, right? They are good people who are trying to, do well. And the importance with disqualification is that you have to be able to say and be okay with a no or parting ways fast and furious, right? We only have so many hours in the day, and one thing that I talk to my team about is if you have 1 hour to make the most amount of money, where are you going to spend your time? And I know this isn't necessarily a data conversation, but data is just as important with coaching than anything. And so I'm very big on it. And my sales ops will will laugh because I go in a lot of rabbit holes, but I'm usually trying to either prove a point, solve something, and then, or I get distracted and move on to something else. But the idea is, if you know where to spend your time, if you understand how to make the most of your impact with what you have, your territory, your customer set, who you're calling into, disqualification is just as important as a good call too. You don't have to waste your time. If you could find 5 more deals that will, close instead of this one deal. And what if the other stat that we have is a 20K deal closes just as fast as a 50K for us in our space. And so if that 50 doesn't close, you better get 3 more, 20s. So what are you doing if that's not even the right ideal customer profile, right? So it is very relevant in our business to disqualify.
We've studied top performers in sales for the past 10 years. And what we found, it's consistent with all the data, is that the top salespeople in the world are maniacally protective of their time. They're maniacally protective of their time. So when you're maniacally protective of your time, you're less likely to hang out with people who aren't showing any buying interest, and you're quicker to disqualify and move on again and try to find those opportunities that have a higher likelihood of closing. So, and then the other thing, based on what you said a little earlier, is you talked about the importance of consistency, and that coaching, those one-on-ones, that can fall off when things get tough, when there's a lot of pressure. And I think we can all agree at every level in our business, there's a tremendous amount of pressure these days. So I always say prospecting, coaching for managers is like prospecting for reps. It's the lifeblood of the role. However, it's the first thing that falls off when things get tough. So appreciate you sharing that, and love the focus on data, because when you can point to data as a coach, it becomes a lot more objective, and it can be a lot less emotional. Victoria, you talked about uh, skill set, like getting people better. And granted, the way sales organizations are successful is that revenue is coming in. Revenue comes via deals. But a complaint of a lot of top performers, a lot of individual contributors, and it's told and retold in exit interviews when they leave, is that all my manager cares about is the deal. The one-on-one, even when it's scheduled, morphs into a deal debrief. What do you say to those managers who may sometimes over-index and focus too myopically on just the deal?
So that's really interesting because, again, sales is about closing business and revenue, and it's deals. But I like to, not just report the news, but to create the news. And I think a lot of times when you're just focused on deals, all you're doing is reporting what other people are trying to, are feeding you. And while it's important, it is definitely a slippery slope to take your foot off the gas. And this goes back to sort of the coaching framework and a little bit of that cadence. It's very easy to put things in your calendar and then not follow up on them. And if you're not following up on them and your managers are not following up on the reps are going to think that it's not important. And if it's not important enough for you to care about what you say, then it's subconscious behavior. I'm sure there's a scientist out there that can validate this and say that if you don't expect what you expect, it won't happen. And I think that there's a reason that deals are important, but you have to do it in a way that makes it the sort of the why, right? Well, why are we doing this versus just a, hey, I just need to know an update on the deals. And then again, it's the consistency for sure.
And can you find patterns, as you start to work on different opportunities, you start to see patterns emerge, whether it's with that rep or it's with the team, where the team is doing something really good, or some people on the team are doing something really well that they should double down on. Everybody should consider focusing a little bit more on. Or conversely, there are things that are happening where, whoa, maybe this is an opportunity for training. What are your thoughts on finding those signals based on looking at opportunities across the board rather than focusing too much on this deal or that deal?
So it's interesting how coaching has evolved too, because it used to have to be extreme inspection. And as we've gotten smarter and as AI has been integrated more into a lot of our tools that we use, coaching actually should be second nature. It should be part of your daily behaviors. But what inspecting deals does is open up opportunities for coaching, which is, hey, we're always losing after a demo. Well, why? Let's go listen to the more demos. How about I sit on a demo? Why don't we practice a whiteboard and a role play on this? So it's not, again, sort of going back to this punitive thing. It's not about, thinking you're not doing well. It's not about the deals you have might not be right, but it is important to know where we're losing and where we're winning. I mean, we do just as much loss analysis as we do on win analysis. And
can you explain that?
Yep. So a loss analysis is after we lose a deal, we will get together and talk about why we lost that. At what point do you think we could have saved it? Were there when the buying signals stopped? Have we, there's usually a checklist that I like to follow. Usually it's, did we do a quote review with them? How do we know the partner? Do we know the buying committee? Was there, what did we miss? And usually what we miss is that they chose either to stay what they're doing or, it just dead. They chose nothing. So I guess that's the same. They chose nothing. And we could have asked those questions ahead of time. In fact, a lot of my forecast calls when I'm with my team is like, have we even asked for the PO? Have we even asked, if you, what would it take for you to even just select us? Right. I mean, there's some basic, kind of questions that you can ask that sometimes I think we're afraid to ask because it's hard to hear that, you inherently don't want to be rejected. So, that if you ask that question, they could say, no, I'm never going to choose you, but you keep it going. And even as a buyer, it's hard to say, hey, I'm not, look, I didn't get the budget. I tried. But we're getting better at it. And, I think, also the new buyers, they're the same generation now as a lot of the sales reps. So this is all new for them, as well. And they're learning how to buy, and they're learning how to, have that vendor sales etiquette as well.
And what have you put your finger on anything that's you've noticed is very challenging working with the modern buyer versus the more legacy buyer that we've been familiar with over the years?
Yeah. So in the past, it was very difficult to get information. So they had to come to you as the expert. And there was trust and loyalty built up just through that process, right? We didn't have a lot of information on websites. Maybe things were gated. You had to go to a trade show in order to get information about something. So, and we're talking just 10, 20 years, right? I mean, I was, again, I got my first, I mean, we obviously had internet, but even just having a BlackBerry to travel and communicate was not until, early 2000s. And so what you can do right now is you could watch videos, you could go on Reddit, you can, go on all these websites that talk about the product. You can see demos and videos. You can talk to your friend. So buyers already have know what they're looking for. The other thing that has really impacted selling is obviously the Magic Quadrant. A lot of times you are not even allowed to play if you're not in, far right, up and, and up and to the right. So you have to really overcome a lot of those objections if you even get a seat at the table. So it's already feels like sometimes you're on the defensive versus the offensive. But I think we do a really good job of getting through to when someone wants to talk to us, it's usually because they have done their due diligence. They already know about us. I mean, and this is general to Carbon Black, but we created the EDR industry, right? So we have a reputation of being one of, the best in the world. VMware bought Carbon Black. There was a little, so there was some integration, and now, the Broadcom acquisition is there's a little bit of limbo, but for the most part, we have a great reputation. And so in some ways that's even a different buying and coaching model as well. When you've got, when you're number one versus, fighting constantly the competitor, you also have to change your tactics and coaching there as well.
Well, yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, change your tactics, change your coaching depending on where you are. I mean, even in pick your sport. If the team is up by a lot within the game, they coach that differently than if they have to come from behind or if it's a close game. So that makes a ton of sense. And we touched on a lot of different things that could tie to this next question, but I'm going to ask it, Victoria. What's one very important lesson you've learned along the way? So a lesson learned type of thing when it comes to coaching and leading people.
The biggest lesson that I have learned is do not be defensive. I've had a couple people in my career tell me that you're defensive. And that is really hard to sort of like even just internalize. Like, what does that mean? You asked me a question, so I'm responding. How can that not be defense? That to me is just my normal reaction. And I think what I've realized is that you've got to take things in, say thank you for the feedback, and change the perception that someone felt this way, and that made them uncomfortable to tell you, because that's hard for them to probably give someone some feedback. Huge. And even if you don't agree, you now can change their perception on how you respond to something. You can change their perception of you and everyone else on recognizing that and saying, hey, I didn't realize that, but here's what I'm going to do differently because that was important that you took time out to give me feedback. So that was something that takes a while. I don't know if I've accomplished that very good with my husband, but he still says that. But I do try to understand that even bad feedback doesn't mean that you need to defend yourself. They're not even asking you to defend yourself.
And bad feedback is when you say that, you mean feedback that someone may not want to hear.
Right. So someone may not want to hear that. Right. Like, so, I earlier in my career, I would you're very emotional.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. You think about the reps and not the company. And if you want to get ahead, you look angry. I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm just Italian. So I think in some ways, those are all elements as well of coaching. And maybe that boss of the person doing that feedback could have a moment of coaching for them and say, hey, next time you give someone feedback like that, why don't you approach them differently? Because their reaction could change everything, by the way, right? I mean, there's times where you give someone feedback that they didn't get a job offer, and they're applying internally. And more often than not, how they react is how you're going to feel about them for every other offer out there in the next time.
Yeah. Well, you beat me to bringing up the spouse, but I can tell you from almost 26 years of marriage that one of the ways not to approach giving feedback is to start off by saying, don't get defensive or don't take this personally, but I'll tell you, those two don't work.
Or neither. Calm down doesn't work either.
Oh, relax. Yeah. Relax does not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then see, I told you so. Okay. But the other part of that is, and you touched on it, the importance of leaders learning how to give feedback. And one of my mentors over time said, it's not good or bad feedback, it's feedback. And feedback will fall into two categories: the stuff that makes you feel good and the stuff that it's a little bit hard to hear. But the best situation, the best coaching dynamic exists when both sides understand that they'll be both. And one is the good stuff is, hey, how do I do more of that? And the not so good stuff is, how do I learn and modify? And that's not easy. And that's a challenge. I would say one of the common themes in terms of when we work with clients and when we work with the sales leaders, one of the more valuable pieces of feedback on the sessions is when we talk about how to give feedback. So super, super important when it comes to coaching. So Victoria, let's pivot a little bit and talk about you, right? So we learned from you. Now let's learn a little bit more about you. You are now at VMware Carbon Black. For the audience, just a little primer. What does VMware Carbon Black do? And what do you love about your role and what you do every day with your teams?
Yeah, awesome question. Sometimes I forget that people might not know about VMware or even Carbon Black, but VMware has been around for almost 25 years. Collectively, I've worked there for almost 12 or 13 now. I'm a boomerang. But Carbon Black is the security business unit for VMware. It is a endpoint security container and um, I would say next gen XDR provider. We are a SaaS arm for VMware. So I work in that business unit, and I primarily am responsible for commercial business and international, which includes Canada and Latin America. And we are responsible for protecting all of our customers. We believe that it is important for everyone to have context in their security platform to understand the risk gap that they have in their environment. And we believe we're the only vendor that actually can do that. But what that really means is that we put a little endpoint on your computers and your workloads and your laptops and make sure that we do threat hunting and ransom protection and manage detection services. So it is very relevant today. It's in the news every day. I mean, you see MGM and Caesars being taken out last month. It's great. It's one of the reasons I went back to VMware. I love cybersecurity. I knew that if I was going to go back to VMware, which I always felt in my heart that I would after a hiatus for a while, that if I was going to go back, I would be leading, an important business unit for the Americas and doing something that is really important.
And you're doing that now. What do you love about doing what you're doing and working with your team?
So I'm very lucky that I have a team here in Austin. I have a team in Denver. I have a team in Boston, and then I have some folks literally all over the country. So I do have opportunity to travel into territory to see them. In fact, next Monday we're going for end of quarters. Our quarter is short this year, just with the Broadcom acquisition closing on the 30th. So there's a couple things that I love. I love that when, again, like I said in the beginning, I'm looking to make you better. I want to help you get either a better job where you are or at your next place. I've successfully promoted a lot of my management into better roles and help them in their career. So that is something of a passion to me. I'm excited to see, I'm only as good as my team. So if they're hitting 100%, then, that's fine for me, but I need my team to be, performing on all cylinders. And so, I think it takes someone who really likes to do, sort of that inside sales development work, because sometimes it is, not as glamorous as an enterprise. Like, we're not going to do a $50 million deal or even a $10 million deal. We're going to do, 1,020K deals, and that mindset and that velocity is a lot. It's a very different cadence than someone who does 3 big deals, maybe a quarter. And I love that passion and energy.
Well, in the B2B SaaS world, doing a bunch of those consistent deals and not having all your eggs in one basket certainly contributes to a more positive valuation for the company in most scenarios. So that's what makes the keeps the lights on, as they say. So, Victoria, you mentioned several times that how much you enjoy the challenge of helping people get better. And usually people who are wired that way, they weren't necessarily born that way. They were the recipient of great coaching. There was somebody else who took you under their wing, who said, "I want to help you get better, Victoria." Uh, that's what I hear. What are your thoughts there? Is there that person or people in your life that had an impact on you from a coaching perspective?
Actually, there are. And over the years, I've actually reached out and rethanked them again. So I can call out two folks, Brian Cox and Josh Leslie, who took a chance on me to join VMware. Imagine 2004, someone asking you to tell me what virtualization was. I don't even know what I said, but they hired me. They took a chance. And I remember going home to my family and saying, "Mom, I got this job at a company called VMware." And I was at Oracle at the time. And Oracle was like, I mean, for me, Oracle was, I made it. That to me back then was, you made it, you're in sales. I was so proud. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you go look at this company? They're looking for inside sales reps." And I had only been at Oracle for maybe almost 2 years, but I thought, okay, let's go check this out. And I got the job, but to answer your question, Brian Cox told me one time that A players hire A players and B players hire C players. And I didn't really understand what that meant at the time, but what I realized over the course of the next 20 years, it means that I'm going to surround myself with people who I want to be around to make all of us get better. And at Sail Point, we would talk about all boats rise together. Sail Point, there's very nautical theme. And I believe that. I think that was core of who I was. And then Josh Leslie would push me all the time at team meetings. So I was very afraid to talk in front of talk in front of people and customers. And he would make me do a product presentation every meeting until I could just walk up there and do it without prep. And those two moments are so memorable to me that yeah, I'm so grateful and thankful that I had people who even cared to talk to me about it.
Well, that's awesome, and thanks for sharing. We need more Brian Coxes and Josh
Yeah.
Leslie's and Victoria Abelings in the business. So one other thing I wanted to bring up is I was looking on your LinkedIn profile as we had conversations leading up to this interview, and I noticed that you volunteered, or from a philanthropic point of view, you're affiliated with an organization called Dress for Success. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I love this organization. It's a nonprofit in Austin. It's called Dress for Success. They are responsible for helping women who are getting back on their feet with business clothing, and they actually do resume services as well. In fact, this is the last time that I was actively involved, where I was volunteering versus just donating. We were in New York City, and we would go to some of these women's shelters and help them with the resume building. So it is something I'm extremely passionate about. I do donate a lot of it sounds sort of frivolous, but I do donate a lot of my work attire to this organization. It's my number one go-to place. And what I think is really important for it, and why it was something important for me, is that I believe that age-old mantra that you dress for the position you want. And I think that we've gone away from that a little bit during COVID. And why I think this is really important is that there's a lot of young folks right now that have never presented in front of someone, never actually presented in front of someone. And if they've never had anyone tell them that how you dress and how you're perceived is extremely important, here we are trying to give you a little bit of that. But it's something we talk about a lot at work. We just wrapped up a week of presentations for some new branding that we are launching. And if you were presenting, you have to show up in a jacket and look presentable and make sure there's nothing in the background. And the coaching that comes with that too, and just the confidence with showing that, you're here and you're showing up is extremely important. It changes your mindset. It helps you with your confidence. It dopamine goes, and serotonin's released. It is very important. It is really important. And
And
yep.
so I'm glad you went there. It sounds like a fantastic organization in Austin. My son lives in Austin. I'm going to make sure I share this with him and see it kind of spread the word for the folks that he works with. But I'm glad you made the connection to how people show up for work in our business. I hear a lot and I observe a lot coming post COVID, where life virtually via Zoom, whatever the platform is the norm now. But have we gone too far? I mean, is it okay to show up with a hoodie, with the hat on backwards, with the bed in the background that's unmade? And, I mean, what do
mean,
you say as a person who leads professional salespeople?
So I think it is very, very important that when you are on a one-to-one or a customer call, that is part of how you prepare, right? You do not show up with potentially, anything in the background, noise. You are here to just like you would be face to face, right? The Zoom right now has created a sense of almost comfortableness, but
Mm-hmm.
what it also shows is I think lack of respect at times, maybe your own dignity and integrity, but you wouldn't do that if you were going to let's say church or to again meet a customer in person. It- have we gone too far? I think what is acceptable, and I think this is important, there's going to be team meetings. I mean, I'm sometimes not on camera. I'm like, even yesterday, I was like, guys, this is a rough day. I'm not going to be on camera today. But if I'm going to be on a one-on-one with my boss, you sure know that I have my jacket on. Now, the other thing that happens when I have a jacket on, he's like, are you interviewing? I'm like, no, Sean, but he's laughing because he's like, why? It's almost funny that there's this other flip side of getting dressed up for a Zoom call that, why do you look professional? But it is very important. And I would never encourage you. I would never encourage that that's not something that you take lightly or for granted. And so
Yeah.
now
No,
it doesn't. Sorry, I was just going to say it doesn't help that you do have a lot of these CEOs that just wear hoodies and tennis shoes and they have one outfit, but I think they made it. They probably deserve it at that point. But in sales, you're always selling. So you're selling yourself the minute you get on that Zoom and you're not showing up. But there's also, read the room and, there's going to be times where it's going to be okay not to, hey, this is just a casual call. And that's what's missing. Sorry.
right.
That is also what's missing with this Zoom culture is that when is this casual? When is this just a, hey, to, talk versus I have to put time on your calendar. You've got to log in. We have that awkward, talking and you don't have the hallway conversations, that organic growth that normally happens in the office. So, just like
Right.
that translates a little bit to clothing as well.
Thanks for sharing that. So, Victoria, as we wind down here, I've been asking this question recently. You've been doing this for a little while, and I know, like with my kids, they're like, "Dad, tell me that story again about that time when, what did you just say?" And so, people who perhaps are coming up in this business, and even people who've been in it, just kind of like to go down memory lane sometimes. What's one of the things that you recall that happened as you were coming into the business that a lot of people, if they were just dropped in it today, couldn't believe that actually happened?
I actually have two. I have two things that I can share. There's probably even more if I sit and think about it. But the first that comes to mind, because I get asked about this a lot with my team, and it's unfathomable, is in the beginning. This is probably I graduated in 98, so 2000, 2001. We had to sit by a fax machine for our PO, and imagine having to get a VP that is not in the office. I mean, back then they probably were still, traveling a lot or what, but if they didn't get to a fax machine or they didn't have a printer, that's crazy to think, that we would have to wait. And you just sit there and you hear the sound and then you're like, oh, it's not mine. And you call your friend over and give it to them. The second is quarter end. I mean, we still do a little bit of quarter end in the office, but it became, VMware back in the day was on a calendar quarter end. So my husband's birthday is September 30th and New Year's is November 31st. I missed 11 of his birthdays and I missed 11 New Year's Eves because I was in the office for quarter end. And when I moved to Austin, that is now a 2 a.m. quarter end, not even a midnight. So as a leader, you're there making sure everything's wrapped up. Did it book? You're hitting refresh on the EDI logs to make sure EDI was our transaction from Disty to us to make sure the order came in. Is it clean? Is it in contingency? So but more importantly, that was your family. So this culture of we're in this together. There was no weddings, no babies, no birthdays. That you could not block off end of quarter or year end, right? So I do miss the family that you created with being at end of quarter. I do think it's coming back a little bit. We're starting to see, even we go back for end of quarter, but it's not necessarily the same. There's new cutoff dates, and it's not as extreme. But we do still try to keep a lot of that camaraderie going.
Well, I can resonate with both. I remember fondly, like it was like type 2 fun. I don't know if you know type 1 fun, type 2 fun. Type 1 fun is it's fun while you're doing it, and it's really good to think about. It's fun to think about it. Type 2 fun was like sometimes miserable doing it, but when you look back on it, it was you look back on it fondly. And I view a lot of the end of quarters as type 2 fun, but because it really was, you really did bring the team together, and having everybody sit around waiting for that last deal to come in at 2, 3 in the morning, whatever it may be. In hindsight, you wonder why you had to make that wait that long. Right. But well, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, that is
the fax machine. Right. The fax machines. I can vividly remember the kind of the milestone moment. And my counterpart was based in New York. His name was Steve Morosky, still in business, very prominently. And Steve's team had a deal, and the fax machine broke down. And the way I remember it, Steve or somebody on Steve's team had a camera. And I can't remember exactly when it was. I don't know if it was an iPhone camera or what, but they took a picture of the contract and downloaded and emailed it over. And I was like, wow, if that happened to me, I wouldn't have thought of that back at that time. And I was like, wow, things have changed. And we quickly moved off of the fax machine after that. But I remember that milestone moment. So Victoria, listen, thanks for sharing that walk down memory lane, and love the conversation. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about the importance of discovery, of not being defensive and for dressing for the job that you want. We talked about the importance of coaching and building that culture, and focus of being that servant leader. How do I make you better? And so that topic of coaching is one that's empowering, not onerous and punitive. So thanks for sharing that with us. If somebody wanted to contact you, learn more about what you're doing at VMware Carbon Black, or just ask you a question about whatever we're talking about today, what's the best way for them to do that?
A couple of ways. They could look me up on LinkedIn. It's Victoria Abeling. I'm there. That's probably the easiest way, is through LinkedIn.
Great.
I'm pretty active on it, as you are in sales. And so that'd be great.
Awesome. Victoria
and
Abeling,
I'd love to.
on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I was a panel for this young entrepreneur group too, where it was almost like a Shark Tank. And I still contact with some of those kids today to just get advice. So I welcome that stuff too. So
awesome. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah. So we'll leave it right there. Victoria, really appreciate the conversation today.
Thank you, Matt. This is great. I had a great time. Thank you so much.
And thanks to all of you out there for listening. If you learned something today or you laughed, tell someone about the podcast. It's Coach to Scale. Wherever you consume your podcast, whether it's YouTube or Spotify, go in there, hit the like button, and you'll be kept abreast of all the episodes that we publish, which is on a weekly basis. Again, Victoria, thank you. It's been my pleasure to host this conversation on behalf of Coach to Scale. And until next time, coach them if you want to keep them. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Coach to Scale, How Modern Leaders Build Coaching Cultures. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at coachem.io. That's COACHEM.io. And follow us on Twitter at CoachemNow. See you all next week. Thanks for joining. And remember, coach them if you want to keep them.